dismiss all the other ones starting.
Oh, I see. No, dismiss. Yeah, I almost joined that one and I realized.
I did too.
Okay. Hello, everyone, and thank you for attending the ISMTE 2021 Global event. My name is Xander Vaith, and I'm the Senior Publications and Digital Media Coordinator at the American Gastroenterological Association, and I volunteer with ISMTE in the North America Conference Planning Committee. There are attendees from all over the world and time zones joining us for this event, so please let us know in the chat where you're joining us from. Before we get started, I want to go over a couple housekeeping items to start off. For this session, the speaker presentations will be followed by an audience Q&A. So we're going to hold questions until after the presenters have finished. But feel free to submit your questions at any time during the presentation by using the Q&A field. If you'd like to direct your question to a specific speaker, you can indicate which presenter you're asking by typing an @ before their name. Also, be sure to upvote questions from other attendees you find interesting. We'll make every effort to answer as many questions as possible at the end of the speaker presentations. But before we get started, we'd like to express our gratitude to our sponsors for this meeting. Their support has enabled us to provide you with this virtual event. I'm excited to host this afternoon's session, Putting the Journal Impact Factor into Perspective, where we'll explore perspectives on the journal impact factor and journal citation reports resources. Our speakers will discuss recent changes to the journal citation reports product, different contexts in which the metrics are used, and how journals can best support their authors. Our first speaker is Marie McVeigh, who is the head of editorial integrity at Clarivate. Marie joined Clarivate in 2017 as part of the development team for journal citation reports and has recently moved to the editorial team to extend a career-long interest in bibliographic and bibliometric research for the maintenance of the integrity of the scholarly record as reflected in the Web of Science resources. Our second speaker is Nan Eckardt. Nan is a senior features editor at the American Society of Plant Biologists. She has been an editor and science writer for the scientific journal, The Plant Cell, since 2000, where she works closely with the editor-in-chief and editorial board and is involved with all the aspects of the peer review and publication of manuscripts. Nan is passionate about plant science and helping scientists to publish and communicate their best work to a wide audience. For our last bit of housekeeping, Nan Eckardt has no conflicts of interest to declare. Marie McVeigh is employed full-time by Clarivate, but she has no other conflicts. However, we would like to note that Marie is not able to answer any journal-specific questions. And with that introduction, we'll begin with a presentation from Marie.
Okay, this is the part where I try to share my screen successfully. Let's see how that goes. Please let me know when you can see my slides. And I'll tell you that the reason I can't answer any journal-specific questions is just that the data can be quite complicated, and I don't want to give you short shift. So you can certainly direct your questions to customer support at Clarivate. Are you seeing my slides? My
Yes.
first slide? Okay. I was vaguely tempted to put up a poll and say, how many people have heard of the JCR? But it usually is a pretty uniform answer. The JCR really is familiar, especially to a group like this. It's long been a presence in the library world, but in the past decade or two, it's become more and more visible among researchers, where it is debated and discussed and loved and hated. And I would say it as well that it's not generally well understood and it's seldom properly used. The JCR itself has been published annually since 1975, and there are journals that have appeared every year since then. The JIF has been calculated, Journal Impact Factor has been calculated with the same logic across the entire 46 years. It's a ratio of citations received to the volume of scholarly content published. What has changed over these past 46 years is the increasing volume and type of material that are analyzed, and the way the web format has made the product give room to more information about the journal, not just about the metrics or the citations. In my 25 years of working with and on citation indexing and bibliometrics, the one thing that hasn't changed at all is the purpose that drove this endeavor. The knowledge that the citation network isn't merely numerical and it isn't merely structural, it's semantic and meaningful, and created at its most basic level by the process of reading, doing, and writing research. And that's how Dr. Garfield first introduced the concept of the JCR. And I like to begin with this quote because this was his introduction to the product. A citation index is based on the principle that there is some meaningful relationship between one paper and some other that it cites or that cites it, and thus between the work of the two authors or two groups of authors who publish those papers. The JCR itself was the outcome of citation indexing of the scholarly items, the literature. It isn't a different data set, and it isn't a different way of, it's just a different way of displaying the same data set. The first JCR in 1975 contained the collection of 2,400 journals in the sciences, and it used punch cards and magnetic tapes to analyze 4.2 million cited references within and between those journals. In the preparation of the 2020 JCR, we analyzed 24,000 journals and over 14,000 books and proceedings containing 150 million cited references just to build the top-line data. The new metric, the Journal Citation Indicator, has 3 additional years of data, citation data, so we're looking at close to 500 million cited references. That's 500 million meaningful relationships in the data that represent scholars around the world. If the JCR begins then in the citation indexes, I want to take a quick look at where the citation indexes themselves come from. All journals that go into the JCR are those that have been selected for the Web of Science. There's no separate selection process for indexing and metrics. The same standards are applied to all the content. We examine the publication standards and the publication practices journal by journal. We look at the editors and authors that are choosing to participate journal by journal. We look at the way the journal integrates by publication and citation a research topic. All journals evaluated for the Web of Science pass these first 24 quality criteria for editorial rigor and best practices. Then we add the additional impact criteria for selection into the Science Citation Index, Social Sciences Citation Index, and Arts and Humanities Citation Index. But this process of selection is why being in the JCR has come to matter as an indication of journal quality. All journals in the JCR are journals that are quality enough to be selected for Web of Science. So to understand the data in the JCR, you have to see it as the result of journals being selected for and indexed in Web of Science. I see the JCR as a hub to get to information about journals, lots of information about journals, your own journal, your near competitor journals or collaborators, your kith and kin, your friends and frenemies, all the journals and that you interact with. So to put the JCR or the JIF in perspective, you need to see that the context of that bit of the JCR was always intended to be the JCR itself at the level of the journal profile page. Journals in the JCR have a profile page with a rich set of information about the journal, its content, and its community. We have article and journal level open access data, which was a relatively recent addition. All Web of Science journals that interact with your journal via citation. That's a network created by the research literature itself. We've now included citation performance metrics, both at the article and journal level. We're going to touch on that just a bit, as well as category comparisons across the complete Web of Science journal content. The profile page, we want to see this as a context to understand a journal and a context to understand that metric around the journal, the JIF. There are many different factors that make a journal valuable to a reader, valuable to an author, valuable to a library. And we want to represent much more of that, not just citation interaction. And I think I am sorry about that. I put originally the 5-year trend for Nan, this is Plant Cell. I always like to give you a journal that you can orient to. The first presentation of the journal impact factor in the product, in the context, in perspective, is shown in the context of time and category. The percentile rank is shown across the top, where it shows in the category of biochemistry and molecular biology. The journal Plant Cell is in the top quartile, along with top quartile ranking in plant sciences and in cell biology. The JIF itself is given a context of performance over time. For this journal, it's 24 years, as well as whatever additional years are in the pre-digital file. And what I found interesting was that what looks initially like a rising curve in recent years is actually a fantastically steady placement in the top of categories where this journal is most relevant. The journal is also placed into a network. The organizations, contributions by organizations, regional and national contributions that define the network of researchers that are participating in the creation of this journal. We also show a citation network of all sources, journals, books, and proceedings that are part of the literature network that form itself around this journal, both the references that the journal gives to that literature, as well as the references that that journal receives from the literature. I also wanted to show this. It's an underappreciated metric, the cited half-life. It's actually the median age of the content in this journal that was cited in the year 2020. If you don't do median age, let me put it this way. With a cited half-life of 11.7 years, that means that in 2020, the journal Plant Cell received 65,000 citations, and half of them were to materials that were more than 11 years old. That is, they were published before 2010 and cited in the year 2020. So this is an indicator of where the value of your back file is, even if this impact factor is only using 2 years of citations. The citations that the journal is obtaining and giving in the year 2020 are so much richer than all of that. And so much of that data is available to you in this kind of huge back file of the journal, as well as of the data that's presented in the JCR. Even in the fast-moving fields of cell biology and biochemistry and plant sciences, this back file has a massive influence in the current literature. The context of the GIF also includes not just the outsides of the network around the journal, but the insides, and that's the bones of the metric, the journal impact factor itself. What I see here is that one item of the 321 in 2018 or 2019, all of those items that are part of the journal impact factor, had 71 citations displayed on the histogram on the bottom. But also, if you click through to that item in the Web of Science, you see that it was cited 71 times in 2021 for the impact factor calculation, but now its record contains 212 linked citations. So this journal, this item had a performance that predates the journal impact factor calculation as a 2018 item, as well as continuing to develop and possibly for many years since. So this item is not static, and it is a part of how that journal is performing in the scholarly literature. The journal impact factor is just one part of its influence, one isolated year. But there's a surround of scholarly use to that item before and during and years after this item numerically would contribute to the journal impact factor. For the citation histogram, I like to think of this as kind of an X-ray of the journal impact factor. Here you see that there are in light blue about 192, I counted them beforehand, 192 non-citable items, editorial materials, information materials, letters, correspondence. 143 of them, that's 74%, have no citations in the journal impact factor, hence the term non-citable. The other 49 have a total of 104 citations of the 3,600 in the journal impact factor numerator. It's not no influence, but that is a part of how the journal is dynamically influencing the literature, also through these materials that maybe aren't scholarly or primary research, but they are a part of how the journal participates in the citation network and in how people think and write about their own topic. The majority of the content in the journal is primary research rather than reviews. Only the dark little caps on these things are the reviews. But the editorial and information material is also being used and it's being referenced in the literature. Then you look at the numerator. Where are your citations coming from? Where is your engaged community that's creating impact for your journal? When you use that numerator calculation, you can view all citing articles that were used as part of the impact factor calculation. Once you get them into the Web of Science, you can break them down by topic. This is a category distribution showing plant sciences as well as chemistry and cell biology. A global network, which you may not have noticed, but on the previous slide, the primary authorship contribution is from the United States, but the primary citation contribution is from the People's Republic of China. Then you can look at the individual institutions where these people who are reading and actively citing your journal in the current year of 2020, where are they coming from? What institutions are or is most actively using your journal? Now, this new metric, JCI, Journal Citation Indicator, is a performance metric that's now for all journals in the Web of Science core collection, not just the Science Citation Index expanded and the Social Sciences Citation Index, where you have a journal impact factor, but now we have 24,000 journals in the JCR that have this Journal Citation Indicator metric. It uses 4 years of citations to 3 years of content, so a slightly larger window of content. That content is limited to the scholarly works, the articles and reviews. So if it's counted in the denominator of this metric, citations to that item are counted in the numerator of this metric. So it's based only on the scholarly works and citations to those works. Item performance, so the citation performance of an article in the year 2018 is considered only in the context and normalized against only articles in that topic, plant sciences, cell biology, and biochemistry and molecular biology, that are also articles and also published in 2018. So it normalizes out some of the influences on citation performance that are not quality related. They are merely characteristic of size or age or field. It's complicated to calculate, but simple to understand. JCI over 1 means that on average, this journal is outperforming the citation performance of similar items. And a JCI below 1.0 means that the journal slightly underperforms the average performance of items in that category. And for plant cell, we're looking at 2.46 as the journal citation indicator. And as might be predicted from the steadiness of the impact factor curve and ranking category, this metric is not deviating a whole heck of a lot from that total top-notch performance. Ranking is given by journal impact factor as well as by the journal citation indicator. But here what you note is the rank by journal impact factor compares this journal only to 195 cell biology journals in the Science Citation Index expanded. In the cell biology category in the Web of Science core, there are 201 journals. And here there's some much larger differentials between the size of categories. And in other fields, these differentials get even bigger. And I'm winding up as quickly as I can. I just wanted to note that among the factors that we consider qualitative rather than quantitative in the JCR, or does the journal provide an OA option? Are OA items contributing to impact? And these data were based on our grant support and then partnership to Unpaywall, now called Our Research, where they are analyzing the availability in gold. For us, we're just using the gold at journal level, and hybrid journals, showing both the article contribution as gold, as well as the way those gold versus subscription items are cited. Talked a lot, really fast. I hope that gives you a way to start thinking about the JCR as a much richer set of information to understand journal performance rather than just one metric. There are roughly 12,000 journal impact factors in the 2020 JCR. There are something like 100 million data points in the 2020 JCR. So if you're only looking at that small a slice, I think you're missing something important. And I stop sharing, I hope. All right.
Thank you, Marie.
Thank you.
Just a reminder to everyone, if you have any questions, go ahead and drop them in the Q&A section, so that way our speakers can address them once the presentations are over. But right now, we'll welcome Nan for her presentation.
Okay, I will just share my screen here. Hope that it works. Can you see my slides?
We're good.
Okay, I will just touch on a couple of points for journal editors to consider for putting the JIF into perspective. And the first one is, of course, make sure you understand how it's calculated. And I mean specifically for your journal. And then secondly, understand its limitations and look for ways to move beyond it. First, I think we've all seen this basic calculation that the 2-year JIF that's most talked about is citations in the JIF year to all items published in the previous 2 years, divided by the number of citable items published in those previous 2 years. So it includes citations to all items in the numerator, but only a subset of those items in the denominator. And as Marie has been talking about, for at least the last several years, it's possible to download the data from the Clarivate website and check on what has been included in the denominator for your own journal. And so, for example, I know that this number of 321 accurately represents all of the research articles and reviews and other scholarly items that my journal published in those 2 years. However, Clarivate sometimes makes mistakes, and I probably see at least a few mistakes per year for my journal, where, for example, an editorial article has been classified as a citable article. And since Clarivate also maintains the Web of Science as well as the JCR, a good practice is to check on the document type listed for your articles in the Web of Science as they are published and added to that database, and make sure that they are accurate as far as the journal is concerned. So we were checking on these numbers and article types back in 2018 and 2019 and requested 1 or 2 corrections before the current JIF was released in June of 2021. And I continue to check the Web of Science as our articles are being published in 2021. As an example, here's a typical Web of Science entry for a recent article in our journal, considered editorial material in the plant cell. So we publish a handful of these articles every month, and they are short 1 or 2 page news articles written by journal editors that highlight recent research in the same issue. And they're not intended to be cited. So it's entirely appropriate that they are not counted in the JIF denominator. And yet every so often I notice that 1 or more of these articles has been tagged in the Web of Science as an article here in the document type. It'll say article rather than editorial material. Most recently this year, 9 of these editorials were labeled as articles, which would actually have a significant and erroneous negative impact on our JIF if not corrected. But fortunately, Clarivate has a mechanism whereby journals can request this type of correction, and they will make corrections when warranted. So if I see something like that, I will let our publisher, Oxford University Press, know about the errors, and then they go through the due process of contacting Clarivate, and corrections are made, and the corrections that were needed this year have been made. So I think it's worth making sure that someone is doing this for your journal. And the other reason that it can be important to download and look at the data and understand what's going into your denominator is to make sure that the journal editors are in agreement with what you see there. So journals, of course, come up with a variety of article types in addition to research articles and reviews and editorials. And you would ideally like to avoid publishing an article type that the journal editors consider to be editorial material, but Clarivate considers it to be a scholarly article that they're counting in the denominator. And I would argue very strongly that this is not attempting to game the system. It's rather making sure as a journal that you're not shooting yourself in the foot, given how the calculation is made. So for example, in the plant cell, we publish a handful of both letters to the editor and commentaries every year. And a commentary, we've discovered, is considered citable and counted in the denominator. And this is appropriate because commentaries in our journal are akin to review articles in some ways, perhaps has more opinion or is more narrowly focused than an in-depth review, but it really is scholarly material. And here, for example, the second most highly cited article in our current JIF is a commentary. And on the other hand, Clarivate understands that in our journal, as in many, if not most other plant science journals, I believe, letters to the editor are not primary research articles, and they're not considered as citable content and not counted in the denominator. And this is true for our letters, which typically are somewhat in the nature of editorials, and they're really not intended to be cited. So we try to take some care with these categories and make sure that we don't mix them up. An author may submit a letter to the editor that really belongs in the commentary category, or vice versa, and that's an editorial decision that we pay attention to. So my second major point about putting the JIF in perspective is that once you understand how it's calculated, to move beyond it. And that means understanding its limitations and looking at additional metrics, and to focus on supporting your authors. So of course, the 2-year JIF that is most often talked about and looked at is very limited, as it represents only 2 years worth of citation data. And of course, it's very nice to know that a large number of articles in the journal that I work for is highly cited within 2 years of publication. But it's really far from the only way to measure value in publications. And as Marie mentioned as well, the JCR now has a lot more information and other metrics besides this 2-year JIF. And it's really worth exploring all of this data for your journal. So I won't spend any more time talking about the JCR, as Marie covered that very well. I just want to touch briefly on defining and advertising the strengths of a journal and finding ways to support your authors. So of course, this will mean different things depending on different journals. For the Plant Cell, we emphasize that we're a society journal. We publish work that is in the top tier research in the field. We have a world-class editorial board, and we also conduct professional post-acceptance scientific editing that can really improve the presentation and accessibility of the results. And I will also just mention that although we say we seek to publish papers that are in the top tier of work in their area, this is based on a judgment of the methods and the approach used and the quality of the data presented, and not on any guesses that papers are likely to be highly cited. So we make decisions based on the science and not on what an editor or reviewer thinks is the likelihood of papers being cited or not. And then on the other hand, the newest journal in our stable is Plant Direct, which the American Society of Plant Biologists publishes jointly with the Society for Experimental Biology, with Wiley as the publisher. And this journal has an entirely different focus from the Plant Cell. And merely in terms of the JIF, it's probably somewhere near the bottom of Plant Science Journal with a JIF, 2-year JIF of just over 3. And yet, we view this as a highly valuable new addition to publishing in the plant sciences. It's a peer-reviewed journal that is immediate open access, and it focuses on publishing sound science, which means they don't make judgments about the novelty or whether the work is at the top of the field. It only needs to be judged rigorous, sound science. So they will, for example, publish negative results or results that repeat what others may have already found, maybe in a different plant species or different system or under different conditions. And these are studies that can be difficult to publish elsewhere, but are valuable to the advancement of science and to scientists' careers as well. And Plant Direct has also started publishing registered reports, which is a really interesting new thing for researchers and journals, whereby authors can have proposed experiments and analyses reviewed and even accepted prior to conducting the actual research, which might actually help in designing and conducting high-quality experiments. So here, finally, I've listed a number of the ways in which we try to ensure that authors have a good experience and want to come back and submit to us at the Plant Cell again. So we recognize that authors have many choices of where to submit, and the impact factor is not the only thing that authors are considering when deciding on a journal. And a number of the items that I've listed here fall under author communication. And so we like to make sure that we are communicating effectively with authors. And then we want to work with our publisher to put out the best product that we can and continually seek to make improvements. So as one example of this, I meet pretty regularly with the marketing team from our publisher, Oxford University Press, and that's separate from the production side of the journal. And that team is really focused on what they can do to help us get authors that we might be missing to submit to us, right? And that's all very well and good, but I'm fond of reminding them that I think a big part of marketing is to make sure that we are giving our existing authors a great experience every step of the way to publication and beyond. We'd like our authors to say, wow, that was really a fantastic experience, right? The submission was easy, the reviewers were thoughtful and fair, and the turnaround time was good. The science editing was amazing, and my article was highlighted with a well-written news feature, and the final article and the figures looked just great. You know, the whole experience was just awesome. And we need to work on improving all of these elements every day. And I will stop there and happy to move on to questions and discussion.
Thank you, Nan. Very much appreciated. So now we have some time for questions from the audience, which I haven't seen any pop into the Q&A section other than
I stopped.
Marie, you have a question for Nan, so would you like to ask her directly?
Sure. I wanted to write it down so I wouldn't forget because I was like following what she was saying. Those registered reports, that's really interesting. You said that, you know, this is a proposed research.
Yes.
And it can be accepted, you know, I'm making sure I got this right. It can be accepted before the research is actually done. What do you do when the research is done?
Well, I was just actually taking this off of the Plant Direct website. Mm-hmm. And I think that a number of other journals are doing this too. It was just this was the first I had heard about it, that when one of our journals started doing it. And it looks like they have outlined a lot of guidelines that you have to follow. And I think that, yeah, it sounded like they will review your proposal for research. And if the reviewers find that the approach and the methodology looks sound, then they will accept publishing the results. I guess, regardless of what they are. And it sounded like some of the rules were that you can't change what your goals were. You know, you have to stay within your parameters of what you outlined. You can't change your mind based on what your results are, something like that. And you can also, it sounds like you can also opt out then. You don't have to, I don't think you have to commit to publishing in that journal. But I don't know a lot more about it. It did sound very interesting.
Well, that's a huge move in the direction of open science, where if you have available in advance, you can't like p-hack as well. You can't change the intention of your research based on what you're actually finding. You have to say, this is the question we designed to go in and answer, and here's the answer that we got. And then you have to sort of deal with that in a very visible way.
Well, and instead of just talking to perhaps a small group of people at your own institution, your most immediate colleagues, people in your own lab, about what you're going to do and your plans, you get this wider community and some external reviewers to make comments on and improve potentially the plans for your research. That sounded interesting. Yeah.
I also really like the fact that you include author services, like dealing with your authors as an aspect of the value and the impact of your journal. And I think back to this article, I can't pronounce the author's name, I'm going to get it wrong, which was they interviewed a bunch of medical editors whose impact factors had gone up across some defined period of time. And they said, what did you do to increase your impact factor? And the editors were like, we published really good research. We made sure we published really good research, and we treated our authors really well so they would bring their best stuff back to us. I'm like, wow, it sounds like gaming to me. That's exactly what you do, is to get your journal appreciated by the people who have the most stake in its value, is your readers and authors. So heck yeah.
So those were just basically my two big things were, don't ignore the impact factor altogether, because it is there, and people are looking at it and using it. We can't afford to ignore it, and we need to understand it, and as I say, make sure that we're not shooting ourselves in the foot because we don't know what we're doing, right? We need to know how it's calculated and what's going into it, and don't do stupid stuff, right? and then we can kind of forget about it and focus on the science and the authors. And
ideally the impact factor would be responsive to what you do rather than a reason that you do something. I say the impact factor is a good metric and a bad master, and if you reverse those,
right,
you lose on both counts.
You lose.
If you're aiming at the metric, then if you're mastered by the metric, then the metric ceases to be as useful, because it really should reflect what authors are saying has mattered to them.
Right.
So it's a trailing metric. I'm also going to put in a tiny plug for the 2-year window, knowing that it's a really small part of the citation impact of the journal, as we saw with Plant Cell, 11.7 years. I mean, that's a heck of a long time in the world of cell biology. But the fact is, if you are actively changing your journal, do you want it to take 10 or 11 years before that begins to reflect in the metrics? So the impact factor it's very rapid and it's responsive. There's a change and there is some effect of that change in 2 years, and then again, or further on in 3 years. So don't use that as the only answer, but that can be a leading indicator for, further citation impact down the road as as this unrolls through multiple years. Like going back to that same article and saying, well, where has it been cited since? It's no longer a part of the impact factor, but now it's cited, 350, 400 times. It continues to be how the journal is interacting with and impacting the literature. It's just not part of a calculation anymore.
Right.
So yeah, I'd like that stuff.
Yeah, and if you start to look at the 5-year impact factor, it seems like, well, for many journals in the biological sciences, maybe the medical sciences as well, that the citations continue to go up, out several years. Maybe it's somewhere in the 5 to 8 year range or something is where the maximum citations might be seen on average. But if you look at the 5-year, it tends to be higher, but that is probably across the board. So it still tracks what the 2 years doing. You could, take your pick.
The 2-year is a fully incorporated subset of the calculation of 5-year impact factor. One of the things that I do know, I've tracked this across a number of years, and that is that, believe it or not, the cited half-life of journals has continued to go up across time. It hasn't gotten more rapid. It's actually gotten older. The amount of content from backfile that's being cited has gone up over the past, dozen years that I've been looking. And that was one of the reasons that we actually this is one of the, it's like the geek out thing that I did for the JCR a couple of years back. And that is, we used to show the cited half-life and citing half-life as, well, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, or bigger than 10. I was like, no, let's actually calculate how much bigger than 10. Because we had a journal where the cited half-life was 87 years. It's like, that's way bigger than 10. So the number of journals that was in that bigger than 10 bucket got sort of embarrassingly large to be in that non-specific place. So we calculated that to resolution, no matter how many years out it went. And I think that shows that the literature is a much deeper thing than just looking this year, or just looking 2 years back, or even looking 6 years back, 87 years back, or wait 88 years for your 88-year impact factor metric. It's a little long to ask.
So maybe a number of the people that are here were also in yesterday's impact factor session, but I did find it a very interesting. One of the things that was discussed in that session was how there is some move among some academic institutions to stop using, that one number as a guideline for promotion and tenure decisions and so on. And I view that as a real positive development, because that is unfortunate. For example, we a few years back, our plant cell impact factor dropped to just below 10, right? And we discovered that was a really critical number, apparently, for some of our authors who were saying their institutions were actually, requiring them to publish in journals that had an impact factor above 10.0. And so, we kind of started pointing out, well, hey, our 5-year impact factor is higher, right? But so that's a pretty arbitrary number. And it's nice to see that institutions they're getting pushback against that and starting to look at more than just that one number, because it doesn't really reflect the individual as
that's
individual papers, or how well their own work is doing.
That's why there's article data in JCR, as well as the lead to articles in the Web of Science. Nobody likes to see their work misused. Period. End of sentence. And, one number, as I try to put that impact factor as the impact factor is like less than 0.1% of the data that we publish as part of the JCR. So to see nothing ever looked at but that, it breaks my little bibliometric heart. It's like, there's so much more here, because a journal itself has so many more parameters of value and interaction and impact than just citations, or than just citation or journal citation impact factor, journal impact factor. Got the name wrong. So there's a far more nuanced way to consider what is it that you want from publishing in a journal, what is it that you want from reading that journal or shelving that journal. I want 12 years of plant cell on my library shelf, because half of the use is in that 12 years. Not 2 years in most recent issue, but how do you manage that kind of content interaction?
Yeah.
Good author experience. I had another question. Now I'm going to try to find it.
Well, we are getting close to the time, so I just want to thank everyone for attending this session, and of course our presenters, Maria and Nan, for your presentations and all the great discussion. We'd love to stay connected with you. If you're on social media, go ahead and use the hashtag ISMTE Global to find and share content. Be sure to stop by the Exchange Forum. And if you'd like to reach out to our presenters, if either of you want to drop your email address in the chat, then people can reach out and ask you directly. Either way, I'll put mine in there, and I can always funnel questions to them. But I hope you have a great afternoon, and we look forward to seeing you again.
I'll just quickly put that in there.
Okay. Give Maria a chance if she's typing.
Whoops. It's .com, not .cpom. but it's close.
Well, have a good day, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.